But exactly my point, you've got a cadre of clubs that because they've got money, they do not want to get into the field. They only want to appear when it's harvest time. Surely this must be a travesty of justice.
How is it a travesty of justice when Chainda Bombers is trying to get their players to Zanaco? And now when Zanaco does come calling for their player and pays top kwacha for that matter.
What is the justification for them having a youth system of their own that is not doing as well as Chainda Bombers?
No, you can't say that. I don't think you can say that they're not doing as well as Chainda Bombers, because young Zanaco has produced players like their captain, Zio, came from young Zanaco. I think Charles Zulu passed through young Zanaco. So they are producing players. They're just, it doesn't mean if you have a youth system. Liverpool has a youth system where Sterling came from, you know, players like that came from Michael Owen and all that. But does it mean they should not get a Salah or a Mane who was produced by Red Bull Salzburg?
Can they do more?
Yes.
That's the question.
Everyone can do more, Zite. Celtic can do more.
What should they be doing?
And I feel they are doing more. You know why I say that? Because they've hired a CEO in Malon who's a business mind, who's thinking every day. His job is to sit in the office and think, how can I improve young Zanaco? I've had a chat with Malon. Their focus now is to see how they can maximize the turnover, what they get from young Zanaco. And I believe Nkana is doing the same thing. Power is doing the same thing with the young Power. They are producing players. Young Linos Jr. is in the team now, playing. He came from the junior ranks. So they are doing something.
So by your estimation, they are doing very well.
They're not doing very well. They're doing okay. What they need to do now is focus.
Okay good enough?
No, it's not. And I feel they're probably trying to improve. And that's why the club licensing, I think, once it kicks in fully, it will sort out this problem. Because I keep singing the same song. We need to start focusing between 9 and 14. Because that's where the mess up is. I've had chats with you before. And from my years of administration, what I have found is that the damage of our players is being done between those ages. And where are those kids in that time? They're in school, most of them. It's only now that we're having teams like Basa Academy, School of Excellence, who are starting to teach the kids the right techniques in the right way. If you go to Katete, you will find that, yes, people are passionate and they're training 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds, but what are they doing? They're doing 20 laps as training. They're doing frog jumps, you know, as making them strong. Climbing up mountains. Kids don't need that. As the sooner we change that mindset and start empowering the people who are dealing with our youngsters, who from my point of view is the teachers. They are the biggest key to Zambian football changing, in my view. The sports teachers, if we can train them in youth football techniques, believe me, in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, Zambia will be untouchable. Why? Because the natural talent is there. The flair that we have is only similar to Spain, maybe, and Brazil. You know, we are like South Americans in the way we play. And I've gotten this from coaches who've come here and seen our players. You know, we have that. But what do we lack? Positioning. When to pass and when to shoot. You know, how to press. Basic things which are taught to youngsters at a young age. Now, no matter what the guy in Chainda is doing, or Baulen is doing, or in Kafue is doing, if he doesn't know what he should be doing with a 10-year-old, there's nothing he can do, no matter how passionate he is. So I feel you can't blame anyone. You can't blame Zanaco, you can't blame the lower league teams, but it's an effort that everyone has to put in, you know, energy into. And if we want to change football, it's not just most people say, no, why isn't FAS doing this? School football is dead. No, it's not just about FAS. It's everyone coming together to change the mindset and the way we are doing things.
Sometimes you can be tempted to think that we like talking in this country. Let me turn your attention to a little matter you could be very familiar with, the Chisamba Declaration. For all it's worth, some of the things that were said in the Chisamba Declaration took another 10 years, 15 years to even begin to half implement. We surely love talking in this country. Why? Why do we keep talking and not acting?
You know, I will not go into too much detail about that, but I totally agree with you. It's a Zambian thing to do more talking than action. I've seen it in my running of football where people come and talk big. No, I want this team to do this. I want us to take it to the next level. And when it comes down to it, you say, oh, can we have money for water? And you'll be like, no, I'll call you back. And it's the Zambian way, unfortunately. And maybe historians will explain to us why Zambians by nature are so laid back. Because that's one thing, you know, foreigners always notice when they come to Zambia, that Zambians are just so easy and laid back in everything we do, you know, whether it's business
What's
or
the
work.
most frustrating attitude
About
you've
who?
met in Zambia about running football, being
Oh,
involved in football?
There are a lot of things. I mean, you can talk about people coming into it for the wrong reasons. If you come into Zambian football because you want to be famous for running a Division 2 club somewhere in Chaisa, it will not work. You're wasting your time, because they will praise you the day that you come and buy new jerseys, but the day you lose, they'll just say, it's just wasting our time. You know, it's because that's how we are as Zambians. So there's so many things you can talk about, but honestly speaking, I'm not someone who wants to focus on the negative sides or the negative sides that I've seen, because they are there. Just like in any other country and in anything else that you do in life, there will always be a negative side. But mine is more to concentrate on what is positive about football and to push that agenda.
Now, in your years managing football, one of the coolest properties you managed to develop was Chisambalungo.
Yeah.
Went to Georgia, finally played in Russia, played for the national team. Let's talk about the Chisambalungu story. First, in what state did you find that talent?
The first time I saw Chisamba, he was barefooted. He used to like playing barefooted because he felt he controlled the ball much easier. I think he was maybe 13, 14. And he used to play for another small team. So there's a gentleman in Kafi who was very good at dealing with youngsters from 10, 11, 12. I mean, he wasn't a professional coach, but he was just good at relating with them and bringing them up. So when I first saw Chisamba, he came to the pitch and he dribbled everyone on the pitch, you know, barefooted, and he just, you know, destroyed all our defenders. They could only stop him by hacking him, you know, but he would just get up and go on. So he's a boy I'll never forget from how I first saw him, you know what I mean, and how he had risen. Yeah, so that's a memory I have of him.
He went to Georgia, and when he went to Georgia, and he wasn't being called up to the national team, there was little talk that he was being offered an opportunity to play for the Georgian national team. How familiar were you with that one?
Yeah, it was all just talk. I remember that period. But I mean, you couldn't blame anyone that time, because who watched any game from Georgia? And honestly speaking, the league in Georgia is not that strong. It was just a route out. Ultimately, the agent just said, we need somewhere to keep him in Europe. This boy is talented, but we can't lose him. He didn't go to Georgia first. He went to Russia for trials. And while he was there, I think there's a team in Armenia that liked him. Okay, I think probably where Mbola ended up going. They liked him, but they found some medical condition they were not sure about. So they sent him for further tests. And that's how that deal fell through because of time. So the agent said, no, we don't want to send him back to Africa. Can we keep him here at a team in Georgia that's willing to take him for a 6 months loan while we find him where to go? So that's how he was in Georgia. But I mean, you know, we all know what Samba could do at the time, and they loved him so much in Georgia. And Georgia being a small country where such talent is not seen, yes, they had offered him, citizenship to become part of the Georgia national team. But I don't think for a moment that Samba even considered it. Of course, like every young player, he wanted to play for the national team. And I told him to just be patient, and he waited, and it paid off in the end with him winning the AFCON in 2012.
Let's fast forward. In the year 2012, and you're coming with the resume of having managed Kafue Football Club and Lusaka Celtics, and which finally turned out to be Kafue Celtics. You offered yourself for election for FAS. What moved your heart in that direction?
It's a funny story, actually. At that time, we used to play Madalas at the time, I think it was called BP Sports Club. It's now Fosway Arena. And after a game, standing around, having a drink with the guys, I think Vincent Mwale was one of the people there, and a few other close friends, like I said, who I've grown up with since I was a kid. We're talking about the election, and they said, one of them just said from nowhere, "Why don't you stand?" And it never occurred to me that I could. It seemed like something that was just too far to be in FAS. It's
and that was
guy
after,
from Kafue, and
after winning AFCON.
Yeah, and after AFCON, I was thinking, who am I going to replace? Because these guys are heroes now, So I just rubbished it. And the guy said, "But what's the difference between you and this?" I won't mention names, but I mean, they said, "But in terms of administration, you've been running a team. What's the difference between you and this gentleman, or that gentleman and that gentleman?" So I thought about it, and I said, "No, I think it's better I do it in the 2016 one. Maybe I'll be more ready. I'm still learning. I've just started running Celtic. I've been running it for 2 or 3 years. Let me focus on that." The guys weren't having it. They just said, no, just do it. Just do it now. So after that discussion, the thought was, let me try. And honestly speaking, I didn't go into it wholeheartedly. I wanted to try so I understand how elections work, thinking that I would definitely not make it. I mean, who's going to vote for me? Who knows me in Kitwe, you know what I mean? Or in Northern Province. So I decided to go for it, but just to see how it works so that in 2016 I'm ready, 100%. So that's how I decided forward my name.
How did you campaign?
Before the campaign, I remember I went to GK, who was the GS at the time, because I'd become close with him. I was always at FAS, trying to find out this and that, and GK, I told him my thoughts. He said, "No, it's a good idea. I think you go ahead." I spoke to Mr. Mwamelo as well, who was VIP at the time, and I remember we had some interactions with him the years before that, and he also encouraged me to do it. So that's how I started. And then there was a meeting in Lusaka where all candidates were allowed a chance to speak to the people.
Who organized that meeting?
I think it was Mr. Jeff Chipilingo at the time. I think he was coordinator for Lusaka or something. I'm not sure, but it was, I remember the then President Kalusha Walia was there. So it was organized by them, and we were allowed to come and speak for 2 minutes or 3 minutes each. But it was at Lusaka Club. So I went there, and through my interactions with Division 2 all the way from, I had known a lot of people because I was always at games, meeting the other administrators. So it was easy for me because I was facing people who I had interacted with. I was never one of those who sits back, and I socialized with everyone. So it was easy for me to stand in front of them and tell them, and they knew what I was saying was true. They knew my background because we were already talking to each other.
What was your manifesto like?
My message was simple. I'm in football. I have suffered for football. I know what it is to give your last 20 kwacha to a player, instead of buy bread at home. I know what it is to lose your business. I've lost 2 businesses because of football. That was my message. It was as simple as that. And if you put me there, I'll be there to represent you because I know what it is to run football. And
did the camps fight to have you on their side? I remember Emmanuel
No.
Mnaile was standing, so was Kalusha.
No. At that time, Mnaile was standing as what?
President, 2012.
You know, I was so disconnected with the political side of it that I don't think anyone knew me to want me anywhere. And honestly speaking, I think everyone underestimated me, including myself, to be honest. You know, so my message and the way people reacted, it was, I mean, I was surprised also that people were so happy to hear what I had said, you know.
So the shocker happened, you win.
Yeah.
Boom, you're in Faz.
Mm.
What was the reality of that moment?
It was a bit surreal because I didn't know where to start from. Yes, I knew how to run a club, but I didn't know what it meant at national level, you know. But like everything else I've done in my life, I'm always willing to listen and learn. I watch what this person is doing and what everything that's happening around me, you know. So I was very quick to learn, and it kind of came naturally because I was picked to be in charge of youth football, and that's what I had been doing from the time I started football administration.
Appointed by the first president.
Yeah.
What were your rules of engagement, and what did you find in Faz? What needed to be done?
Before I went into Faz, I was one of those people that always tried to get my players trials of the under 17. You know, you go there, you see your player try, and you feel he's done well enough to be in the team, but maybe he's dropped for some reason, which at the time I probably didn't understand. And what I found is us repeating the same mistake and expecting something different to happen. You have a tournament in 2012, for example. In 2012, you have a tournament in 2012. In 2011, March or April, the qualifiers are starting for the under 20 or under 17. A month before the team starts trials, they go into a camp 2 weeks before that, and they start campaigning for the qualifiers. They fail to qualify, the team is disbanded. The next cycle of competitions, you do the same thing. That's what I found, and that's what I felt was the first thing we needed to change.
Politically, who did you need to sell the message for change to?
Of course, the president, the GS at the time. Those are the GS is the person I knew mostly when I went in. I think Kalu, being who he is usually cautious about new people. And I hear now, later on, I hear that before I went into Faz, he had been told by some people that I am against him, you know, so he was still a bit skeptical about me. But when he interacted with me and sat down with me to hear what I'm thinking, what I've been doing, I think he liked most of my ideas, and it was easy for me to sell it to him.
Was it a natural phobia, or he becomes raving mad when you don't agree with him politically or otherwise?
No, it's a natural thing for anyone who's at his level. You have to be cautious who you're interacting with, because most people, when they look at me, they have a bad picture of this ruffian or drug dealer. I've been told all sorts of things about how I look from afar, you know what I mean? So I don't blame him for being cautious. I don't think it was in a bad way. He was just trying to see who I am.
But he needed to appoint you to that sensitive position. You needed to break some ice with him. How did it break for you to finally have serious heart-to-heart conversations?
I think when we had our first executive meeting, we all had a chance to speak about things, and I think from there he picked up on my kind of thinking, you know. And 2 or 3 interactions. He's a football person, so it was easy for him to know who's speaking from their heart and who's just talking. And when I speak football, I think it's clear for anyone to see that I know what I'm talking about because I'm speaking from my heart. So it's easy for someone like Kalu to pick that up of someone because he's been around football his life. So he knows who's a football person and who's not. So after one or two interactions, it was easy. It was just straightforward for him to say, let this guy run with the youth football.
Did he share with you what he wanted achieved? I mean,
he shared with me, with everyone, what he wanted. What he wanted is what our young teams, our under 17, under 20, to always be competing at the high level, and for us to start producing players for the national team. So, and then remember that we had just come from the 2012 win. So, anyone in football knows that after you win a tournament, normally you have that dip, which comes naturally. It's happened to Germany, it's happened to France, it's happened to
Did he
everyone.
actually say that, gentlemen, we've won, welcome to the club, but our team is officially going to start dipping?
No, he didn't say that.
What did
But he said we need to start preparing the next generation, because anyone who interacts with Carlo knows that his dream was to take the team to the World Cup. Okay, we achieved the Africa Cup. That was one of his goals. Now he was looking at the World Cup. And he knew that some of the players in that team that won the AFCON were maybe 2-3 years away, 4 years away from starting to dip. Not to retire, but starting to dip. So with me, he made it clear that you need to start planning ahead. And luckily, that's how I've done things in the past. Celtic teams, I've seen the cycles. I'll prepare a team, I'll start trials now. It will take me 4 years to have a team that's fully done, fully cooked and ready to win promotion. But after that, a year, you start losing players. They start going and what. So there's that kind of cycle. And I remember, I think I interacted with you as well at the time. The first thing I did was draw up a paper called Road to Qatar 2022, which I presented to him, and he liked it because it was talking about how we were going to achieve that, how we were going to prepare a team for 2022, how we could make sure that every 2 years our under 17 and under 20 are constantly going to the Africa Cup, possibly the World Cup.
So what was the issue with our youth teams? Because prior to that, under 17 had never been to the Africa Cup of Nations. Well, under 20 had, but we found ourselves in a situation where all our youth teams qualified for their respective continental championships.
Yeah, but that was 2015.
Yes, a couple of years later. But what was the work in reverse since you came in
at the time we were lucky enough to have had the Airtel Rising Stars, which we still talk about now, because it was one of the best things that happened to Zambian football, in my view. Why? Because it allowed us to go around the country and pick the actual cream of Zambian football. We had the luxury of dropping players who were not disciplined but talented, but still remain with talented players who are disciplined. So the first thing that was lacking before, for me, and this is what I proposed, and luckily it was taken up, is lack of continuity. Like I said, in the past we would have a tournament starting, qualifiers starting in a month's time. You call trials everywhere. Most likely Lusaka and Copper Belt. Okay, you make a team, and a month later you expect to win qualifiers. Yes, we'd go through the first round sometimes, maybe, but the second one, when we would face a West African opposition or Arabs, we find that we failed to qualify. Before that, the last time we qualified was 2007, I think, when we had a good crop of players. But number one for me was that we were lacking continuity. So my proposal was, let's start. We have a tournament in 2015. Okay, it was too late for the 2013 one. For me, in my view, we tried. I think we missed out. We lost to South Africa or something. We failed to qualify. So I said, let's start planning for 2015, which is what we did. So the Airtel Rising Stars 2012 was the beginning and the 2013 was the beginning of the team for under 17 to play in 2015. And that's where the Enoch, Patson, Wayne Museva, Prosper Chiluya, all these boys were found, and Emmanuel Banda, I think, was part of that Airtel Rising Stars as well. So the team did not have 1 month to prepare to qualify for that tournament. They had almost 2.5 years. And what did they do? First, they went to the tournament, in the Gauteng tournament, as K-Stars. That was their first test. Before that, they went as Airtel Rising Stars to Nigeria, where we lost as finalists. After that, they went to the Gauteng tournament. It was the under-17 disguised as K-Stars. I begged the president, and he was very willing to say, okay, this year K-Stars will not go, let the team go. And they went there, played against Brazilian opposition, they played against Sunderland, under-17s, you know, so it was the beginning of getting the dust off, what I call getting the dust off the players, because you have a player who's coming from Chambeshi, who's never played at that level. You have to get the dust off, because football is not just about talent, it's mainly about the mentality. You know, a lot about a football player is about his mentality. That's why you have players who are not so skilled, but they play at the highest level. Why? Because of their mental strength. So the team was prepared for 2-3 years. They went to Gauteng tournament. After that, we fought hard. We were allowed to go to the tournament in Italy, where they played Brazil. Drew with Brazil under-17 national team, not a club, 2-2. We played Italy, actual Italy, with players coming from Juventus and Inter Milan, and you know, when you saw the list, you even get scared. But the boys gave it their all. They lost 2-0. We lost to Israel. We beat the USA. We beat Japan. And for me, that was the beginning of the no fear in these boys, because if you're going to play Brazil, why should you fear Egypt or Ghana or Senegal? You know what I mean? So that mentality, you have to do that with young players at a young age.
And then there was this little devil called MRI,
Yeah.
which was prepared to bring everybody to broad daylight that wanted to cheat in terms of age.
Yeah.
How difficult is the culture of fighting
First of
age
all,
cheating?
MRI was never the devil. That was an angel that came to Zambian football.
I mean, if you want to cheat, and we hear these stories now, they reduce their ages, aided by administrators. We've heard these stories. But in terms of getting the correct age.
The issue of age is something that's everywhere. Not people say it's in Africa, but it's in South America. It's even in Europe. It's in Asia. The MRI, for me, was a godsend, because it allowed us to close that gap. Because what happens is, you know, the desperation for parents or owners of clubs to have their players play at the national team is unbelievable. People, unless you are involved, you will never understand how desperate players are to play for the national team. They will do anything. Parents will change everything about their children. An older brother will become a young brother because of wanting their child to play, which is understandable, because opportunities are so few. You know what I mean? Opportunities are so few. You can't condone it, but the MRI helps us, and that was the reasoning behind saying let's have a continuity. Because when you do the MRI of players, you are guaranteed that even if it's failing, the player is not developed, you know, to the age of 20, 21, when he's saying he's 16 years old. Possible for you to go through the MRI. You could be 18 and you're saying you're 16. If your bones are not developing, and it happens in Africa, our players, maybe because of diet or whatever it is, the development is slow. That's why they call it, there's something they call biological age. So you could have an 18-year-old who's got the development physically of a 16-year-old European. You understand what I'm saying? So the MRI helps you get a player who physically is equal to a player in another country or somewhere else. So the player, it evens out the playing field, in my view. So once the MRI came to Zambia, for us, we had no interest in what parents are saying or whatever the administrator is saying. All we did is, okay, these are the good players. We go to UTH, we test who has passed, and they go. It's the same thing which happened recently. We had 30 players go through the MRI, so 27 have passed. Those players will always be known to be below the age of 17. Whether they've cheated, we don't know. I don't have the right to go to a mother and tell her, you are lying, your child was not born this year. Especially if the MRI shows me that he's 16. You understand what I mean? A FIFA doctor, Dr. Kavungu, has gone through his MRI and he tells you the boy is 16. The mother comes to you with her birth record and says, this is my son's birth record. He's 16 years old. Who's Faz or anyone to say, no, the two are lying? You can't. But that's why it's important that when we do the MRI and you have a team of 27, so these 27 boys who are going to the COSAFA, that should be our under 20 in the next 2-3 years. Because we are guaranteed that their age is within range. And we're guaranteed that in the next 15 years, they'll still be playing.
Tell me something. So, little bit tells me you went to approach Joe Walia to be part of this team. Kalililo,
Yeah.
Chris Kaunda. Why them?
You see, like I said for Celtic, if you want to win as a team, the mentality of the team, from the administration all the way to the ball boys, has to be the same. So, of course, people maybe didn't know that Chris Kaunda is qualified, but he's well qualified. He had a license from KNVB. He had a B license here in Zambia. Joe also had a B license. So, looking at the characters, of course it was not my decision. It was Faz's decision. Technical committee decided. But for me, those are the names that I proposed or I supported.
Why them?
One,
of all people,
because of the way they interacted with youngsters. Chris Kaunda had worked with youngsters at K-Stars. He had been at the under 20 before, under Agre Chiange and Malitoli. I'm sure you remember. He had been in the ranks of the youth football. So he had the experience at that level. So it was a natural thing to say, okay, we need someone experienced. Then we need someone like Joe, who's got a calm temperament, who's got a background of being a professional footballer, knows what it takes. So when he's talking to a player and advising him, he knows what to say. He can tell a player, he can tell Enoch Mwepu, when you get to Europe, this is how it works. This is what you need to do. You know, so that's how the team was put together. And I'm happy to say that everyone was getting along. Everyone was free, was comfortable. Anyone who was part of that team, even the boys will tell you, it was free. We would joke. When it's time to work, everyone is focused and serious. There was nothing like, the coach has done this, or you know what I mean. There was from the team doctor, the physio, everyone was one, and that's very important to have. So when you pick a bench, whether it's for your club or for the national team, it's very important that you have that oneness, and that's what won us the 2012.
Tell me
AFCON.
something. How much power did the technical committee have during that time? Bearing in mind you had a first president who was qualified coach, and I'm sure I had very strong opinions by virtue of his position.
Yeah. The technical committee, in its setup, in FAS, is there to propose and advise. They don't make the final decision. The technical committee cannot come and say, we have hired this person. They recommend to the executive. So the fact that we had someone who was qualified in the executive is only helpful to the cause. So if the technical committee comes and says, Renard should come back, and the president of FAS is knowledgeable enough to say, no, Renard is not the right man, for me, that's a plus. So, and the decision would never be up to him. It would be thrown to everyone. And everyone would decide, okay, let's put this team manager, let's do this. I object because of this and that. And it was always an open discussion, just like it is in FAS now.
They say, speak of the devil and he will appear. Hervé Renard, he's returned to Zambia and post 2012, we had the situation where the team was dipping. Going forward, was Rena going to be the man to take Zambian football forward in view of the dipping of the careers of our stars over the years?
No, I don't believe that, honestly speaking. Why? Because his heart was not really there anymore, not the way it was before. To me, he had achieved what he was after, and he needed a new challenge. Just like any other coach, we see it even in world football. You win the Champions League once, 2 times, you win the league 3 times. You want a new challenge.
When did Renan need to go?
I think he needed to go just after the 2012 win, to be honest. If I had a choice, I would have said he should have gone then. Because the only thing that kept him going with the national team is his love for Zambia, which everyone knows about, you know what I mean? The man loves Zambia, and that's why he stayed.
Wasn't it worth risking with 2014 World Cup qualifiers on the cards to say, okay, he's won us the trophy, so give him 2014?
That's probably the reason that we kept him. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. So in retrospect, you'd say maybe he should have moved on, because our performance maybe at 2013, the players, like, they were not inspired, you know. They had won it, you know, so it's a natural dip that comes along. And unfortunately, we'll blame it on the coach in the end that he failed to go past the first round, or the administration. But for me, it's a natural curve that happens to every team. That Egypt, it happened to Egypt, it happened to Nigeria. I think they failed to qualify twice, if I'm not mistaken, after, or once or twice after they won it. It's a natural process. And unfortunately for us, it coincided with us trying, our dip coincided with us trying to go to the World Cup, you know, which unfortunately our players were not motivated enough mentally to keep that, you know, drive going that they had at the 2012.
You joined the winning team 2013 first round out, and 2014 the reality was, no matter how say we were close, we didn't go again.
Yeah.
Did you now feel like, oh my God, I am now in a sinking Titanic?
No. Our people might, you know, youth football, unfortunately, is one area that no one appreciates when you are doing it. Why? Because the results of youth football only show years after. While you are working on the youth, you never see people praise you that much. We qualified the under 17 for the first time ever to Niger. Okay, in the same year you're talking about, where all 3 teams qualified. But yes, people were happy. But what did we hear after that? They wasted taxpayers' money going to Niger because they came out in the first round. You understand what I mean?
Do you need to be a politician to be in fight?
I think
and I ask that question is because before that, Airtel Rising Stars were told that there were people who were uncomfortable at the way resources were being utilized, and you were the man in charge. And the accusing finger was pointed at you, that you mismanaged things, and that is why that Airtel Rising Stars program was the quote-unquote the first and the last.
Yeah, not first and last. It was the last.
It was the last.
Yeah, the first was, I think, in 2012 or 11. Before that, yeah, you could say that I could have been at the seat, you know, at the top of the program, but at the end of the day, the accusing fingers were only coming from people who were not part of the program. You understand what I mean? Because I remember the stories that came out at the time. There was a point where Airtel themselves, the director, wrote to Faz to apologize for the stories which were coming out, and stating clearly that number one, there was no issue of misappropriation of funds. and number two, the reason they had stopped the Airtel Rising Stars had nothing to do with anything that happened in Zambia, but the main head office which had stopped it in the entire Africa. So it's not like they stopped it in Zambia, but in other countries. Remember that there was about 14 or 16 countries that were involved in the Airtel Rising Stars. It stopped everywhere at the same time because they just couldn't sustain it from their group, their main head office. So it had nothing to do with that. But unfortunately, bringing you back to what you said, yes, unfortunately, you have to have a bit of politics in FAS these days because it was all political. My name has been clean throughout my football career in terms of administration. I've spent my money to do what I've done, you know, to achieve what I've achieved. I've had help here and there, but I have struggled on my own for many years. So to come and be accused of, you know, misusing funds or whatever, it's painful, but it's a reality of this game.
But
if you're not ready to take
why
criticism,
didn't you consider, for example, legal action? Say, people are lying, let me take them to court.
To who? To Zambia Watchdog. How are you going to take them anywhere? No one knows who even officially. Me and you know who runs that page. I know who took that story. But then, how do you prove it? It's a page that's run from the United States or wherever it is. Where do you start?
If you had a legitimate target, you would have?
Definitely. My hands were clean. Why would I not? I had nothing to fear. That's why even when it came out, I laughed it off. I think I was asked at some media event about it by Mr. Kaumba, who's now at FAS, about these accusations. And I had nothing to fear about it because my hands were clean. All I did is I made it difficult for people to misuse funds. And we all know that in Zambia, when you try to be too difficult on controlling funds, a few people will be unhappy about it. And added to the fact that, yes, some people wanted my name to look bad in Zambian football, which, for your information, I don't think it can work because people who know me, people who are in football and real football administrators know what I'm about and how I operate. I don't need to steal money for me to run. I've never, even at my worst time, I've just used my own money to survive.
So the people who wanted to pilfer, meaning it was a culture?
To pilfer funds from the
yes.
Zite, in every country, even at FIFA level, you hear of people trying to pilfer here and there. If there's a lot of money involved, there will always be someone trying to take advantage. And not to say that people are just thieves, no, but a project like Airtel Rising Stars, you know, people might think there was so much money. The budget was like 1 million kwacha, for example. But that's 1 million kwacha over 10 provinces, okay? So you're looking at 1 million kwacha distributed over 10 provinces. And then you look at the main tournament which we had here. You have the district trials, you have the provincial trials after that. It's only 100,000 per province. It's not that much money. But you see, some people would want you to give them cash, and then they just come back and explain by word of mouth what they did. It didn't work like that. Airtel requested that things should be retired. So if you at the top are saying, we're not giving you cash until you give us an explanation of course, one or two people will not be happy about that. It happens. But at the end of the day, we handed over everything to, and you know, the perception that I handled that cash is wrong. I directed what needs to be done. But the handling of cash was through the finance department at FAS. I only gave the program. I only explained what an administrator needs to do in this district or that province, you know. That was my duty. Not that I had a sack of 1 million kwacha and I'm walking around with it and keeping some. No, it doesn't work like that. When you're working at that level, there's systems in place. And we followed the systems, and some people didn't like it.
So, you entered the committee, and we were, at the beginning, we won AFCON, and we fell from grace, as many people would want to think. How do you describe your first term in office at FAS?
I describe it as a total success, in my view. because I was fortunate enough to work with the youth from 2012 to 2016. And in that period...
But you know all too well, what matters the most is the Chipolo Polo. And people
Yeah,
felt that you were a resounding failure on that tip.
I'm getting to that. You're asking me as an individual, right?
Yes.
I believe you want me to explain my feeling
as
about...
Lee Kawani.
As Lee Kawani, my duty was to make sure that the youth teams participate in every tournament, number one. Number two, that the youth teams produce a strong Chipolo Polo in future. Those two things. And when I look at 2012 to 2016, and I look at the team that's there now, I feel that for that period, I did what I was asked to do. Because we have players who I worked with in that period, whether it's under 20 or under 17, under 23, who are now an integral part of
how much
the national
responsibility
team.
do you want to take as an individual for
No, I can't.
the failures of post-2012?
The failures of the senior national team.
Of the senior national team.
I take responsibility just like everyone else. That one is not
what
something that
didn't you do right? What didn't you do right?
I think for me to answer that question, we need me and you to agree that running a national team is not something you come in today and say, okay, let's assemble a team, let's put a coach, and now let's start winning. No. If you think like that, then you're dreaming. It doesn't work like that. Whatever goes wrong, first of all, we need to accept the fact that no matter how much you prepare, teams like France, Germany, you know they prepare their teams 10 years in advance. The Germany that won, when the coach was asked, it said that team started 10 years ago. I can't take credit for it completely. But even if they did that, they did good youth programs and prepared the team. What happened to Germany the following year? Or Brazil previously? Or France? You understand what I'm trying to say? The point is, no matter how much you want to say we are doing everything right, the dip is something that's standard.
So there was nothing that was done wrongly.
I was not
of the dip.
No, I was not there between 2008 and 2012, but if you have to ask me, I think everyone's concentration was more about winning 2012. So the youth football at the time, I would say, was not worked on enough. They probably did some work, but I feel it was not enough, you know, to have that. The trick with the national team is the overlap not to be too big. You understand what I mean? When the team starts dipping, the other one that's coming up should flow into it. And that shouldn't be more than 2 years, in my view. Okay? It can happen, but it shouldn't be too long. It shouldn't be too long. It should be within 2 years, at most within 4 years. You should be able to come back and start competing almost to win the tournament.
As one of the architects of Operation Qatar 2022,
Mm-hmm.
we are a couple of years away from that tournament.
Yeah.
What is the reality, or what is your honest expectation?
The reality is that pound for pound, we have one of the strongest young teams in Africa. And if, and I believe we will, do the right things between now and 2021, number one being this under 23 has to qualify to the Olympics, because it's only with tournaments that you make a team stronger. And that's why our boys seem so fearless now, because they've played under 17. They won the AFCON under 20. They're now going through the under 23 like with no fear. And if we maintain this team, I see no reason why we shouldn't be in Qatar in 2022, honestly speaking.
Would it be the biggest scandal
If
of
we
your
didn't make
life
it,
if we didn't make it?
not a scandal, I'd be disappointed. I'd be disappointed that what I felt was possible does not happen. But I wouldn't call it a scandal, because in football nothing is cast in stone. As much as we are preparing and have been preparing a team, there are over 100 other teams, or in Africa there are 53 other teams that are also probably doing the same and dreaming about Qatar.
I want to ask you this. What seems to be very tricky is that, for example, 99 under-20 qualifies for the under-20 World Cup, 2007 the same, and then we've got 2017, the class of 2017. These gaps, where do we really lose it?
I've explained it to you before. We don't take time to maintain the continuity. Simple example of the current situation. The under-17 that won in Mauritius is the same one we decided to use for the COSAFA under-20, while they were 17, 16 years old. And this is what we did in South Africa 2013. While everyone was playing boys born in 95, we only had 2 players who were born in 95 at the time. Alex Mwamba and Chibwe, Ronald Chibwe. Those were the 2 players. I think there was one more. The rest were all 97, 98. Patson was one of them. Why? Because we wanted to continue with the same players. And that's what we've done now, where the under-17 that won in Mauritius, okay, played the COSAFA, which we didn't do well, which we hosted first. We were knocked out in the first round, remember? People talked. But the same team was still eligible to play the following year, which is last year, if I'm not mistaken. And they went a bit further. That team, I don't know if people are aware, but 80% of those players are still eligible to play in this year's COSAFA and are the same ones who will start the qualifiers next year. Now, what that has done is that we've got players who've been in the system and together for about 3-4 years, and now you will see how they will perform in the next COSAFA and how they will perform in the next qualifiers. If we start doing that every year like that, so the under-17 that Mutapa was with, the team should also move as a unit.
So it's policy direction. What you seem to be hinting to me in a very subtle way is that the policy direction needs to be directed. How much freedom does a youth coach for the Zambia national team have to have? To what extent should FAS just say, you know what, it is going to be like this, coach. Are you able to do the job? No, excuse me, no thanks.
The coach, when it comes to what he does on the pitch or with the players, he's got 100% freedom. That I can guarantee you. What you're right about is the policy direction. And policy direction was given in the previous executive. In this executive, the same policy direction has been given. And that's why, even though the insults came about how we didn't do well with the Wale team, it's the same team, I'm telling you, that will play the COSAFA that we're hosting this year. And I guarantee you they'll do better this year than they did last year. So that's something that has already been said. And my prayer is that going forward, we'll continue like that, unlike what we used to do in the past, where you can't have trials at under 20. For me, it's illogical. The England under 17 moves up to become under 20 when they are 18. Okay? All they do is they pick. We're not saying when you graduate the team, that's it. No one else can come into the team. No. You graduate the team, you see the weaknesses that you have. Our under 20, for example, we saw the weaknesses that were there. What should happen now is remove a few, bring in others where the weaknesses are. As it goes, by the time it reaches under 23 and starts becoming the main team, all those weaknesses are gone. You have a solid unit of players who have been playing together for 5-6 years.
Tell me something. You offered yourself for re-election. And like 2012, you were saying it was a comsa feeling. You didn't know whether you were going to make it. But this time, you must have been confident. And the backdrop was, the national team didn't do well. What was your campaign message?
The good thing with football is there are very few secrets when it comes to what you are doing. You know, everyone sees. If you're a guy who is just there to get your allowances and travel, the administrators are not blind. He might be stuck in a team somewhere in Sesheke or in Mongo, but they see what's going on. They know who's doing what at FAZ. So for me, yes, I was confident. I was not 100% confident, but I was relatively confident that I could bounce back.
You've never benefited from being in a camp.
A camp? Which camp? A team camp or?
No,
camp?
a political camp when it comes to football. A lot of people believe that you belong to the Kalu team.
Well, I worked with Kalu for 4 years. He's become like family to me, you know. He's my mentor. I can't hide that. I don't hide that from anyone. He's a close friend. So if people decide to label that as a camp, well, that's their choice. I don't see a camp. When I meet Kalu in South Africa or anywhere where there's a tournament and I run into him, I do not make a camp. We just sit the way me and you are interacting right now and talk about football. So if that is called a camp, then yes, I've been in camps, then if that's what you call it.
In your hearts of hearts, would you say you were heartbroken when Kalu Shawalia lost the election in 2016 to Andrew Kamanga whilst you got elected?
Well, to say I was heartbroken, I think is even an understatement. I was devastated because this is a person that I had worked with for 4 years, that I had plans with, you know, Qatar plans, with long-term plans, with who supported me in everything I did when it came to youth football. Because, I mean, I think GK did a write-up of how I was knocking on his door for everything to do with youth football. And when he would say no, I would be like a child to Kalu and say, he's refused to give me this. And Kalu would make that call and make sure that the team goes to Italy, whether we get allowances or not. You know, so yes, I mean, it's only natural unless I'm not a human being. I was devastated.
Were you prepared to work with the victor?
When it just happened, I mean, emotions were high. Honestly speaking, I was one of the people that didn't want to continue. But I think a few people, big politicians, I will not say who, Kalu himself, and administrators who had voted for me, all called me and pleaded with me and said, you know, just continue. And and after thinking about it, I felt like it was going to be unfair that people voted for me and then I back out. And at the end of the day, Mr. Kamanga was just another human being as well, who was coming in to try and improve football. So we had to put emotions aside and start looking at it from the football perspective. So
when you were removed as youth chairman, did you feel that that's the price you pay for being close buddies with his predecessor?
I think it's unfair to say when I was removed as youth chairman, because at the end of our term for 2016, my mandate as youth chairman ended on that day. So this was a new executive.
When you're not given the opportunity to
yeah, I think
continue,
that's the right way
perhaps.
to put it. That's the right way to put it. I was disappointed. I was disappointed. Those are the words I can use. I was disappointed that I was not being given the opportunity to carry on what I had planned. But I was still in the executive, and I thought I could still, you know, make my contribution, even though I was not youth chairman. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I was moved to futsal, if I think I was moved to futsal. Which is where I am now. So yes, it was disappointing, but life is like that. I mean, you're not going to sit and start crying and singing to everyone that have been removed.
But you'd have loved to continue as youth chairman.
Yes, of course. I mean, I had something I was trying to push, an agenda, and I think I had done relatively well with the other youth teams. And my aim was that in 2017 we should be again at the under. Of course, we were hosting the under 20, but my aim was that the under 17 should start also preparing as for the tournament coming up. So yes, it was disappointing, but you're not going to sit and cry. And if I did cry, people would have known. And I noticed that even a year or 2 years after, everyone thought I was still youth chairman. Why? Because I'm not going to sit around shouting to everyone that I'm not youth chairman anymore. I was still in FAS, and I was happy to contribute where I was asked to contribute.
Would you say you were lucky? Have you recovered from the disappointment and the devastation?
I recovered from the disappointment, I think 2 or 3 days after, when we had our first executive meeting. And I must say, the first executive meeting, Mr. Kamanga spoke very well to all of us. He acknowledged the fact that we were not happy with what had happened and were disappointed. And it was very cordial. I mean, after the meeting, to be honest, I had the weight lifted off my shoulder, because I felt like the next 4 years might actually bring something new. As much as I was in pain over my colleagues not being there anymore, or my previous colleagues, I felt like genuinely we were going to achieve something different and take football to the next level.
Is there anything to fight for?
When?
Regards you being an administrator at national level?
To fight for? In what way?
What's there to be achieved?
Or for me?
The Qatar plans were, I don't know, your plan that you could see the process through was aborted in 2016, and we are
no, they were not
months
aborted.
Away.
The plans are not aborted. I can guarantee you that the current executive wants the team to be in Qatar in 2022. The fact that Lee as an individual is not the one running the programs does not take that away. As an administration right now, or as me, Lee Kawani, I feel like I still have a part to play in ensuring that the team does make it. Some of the players that are in that team that will go there are still players I interact with. I mean, I'm close to. So my hope is still there that the program will be seen through.
You've spent almost 2 decades in football. Kafue, Celtic now. Started as Kafue FC. What's next for that dream hatched in Kafue?
I have to say that the past few years, the past 3 or 4 years, especially being in FAS, opened my eyes to the world out there. And the people that I've managed to meet in my movements and interactions out there at tournaments, and that has brought me to people like Frederick Kanute, who everyone knows that I work with closely now. It has opened another door for me in terms of football. And I've realized that it's actually in our hands as Zambians to make our players reach that level that we're now seeing Patson and Enoch get to. It's not by chance. It's something that we can do with a deliberate policy in how we are running our teams locally. So what's next for me, I think, is to go to explore that direction a bit more and grow that relationship that I've made with international people out there.
Finally, I want to know, is there a dream in your heart that one day Lee Kawani should be referred to as President of the Football Association of Zambia?
If I have to be honest, I do not really have those ambitions. The truth is, I know I would be a good president. Why? Because my love for football is genuine, just like the previous presidents that have been there. But I feel like I don't have enough right now. And I'm not sure going forward.
What does it take? What do you think it takes?
I think you have to have, you have to be a bit strong politically in the way you think, and be ready to throw yourself in public, because I always say the toughest 3 jobs in Zambia, in my view, is the state president, the first president, and the coach of the national team. Those 3 jobs, I think, are some of the toughest, because you have 17 million people looking at you and criticizing everything you do when you do something not right. You know, and honestly speaking, I'm not sure if I'm ready to deal with that. When you're an executive member, yes, we get insulted as FAS for all the failings. But unfortunately, like everyone sees, when something goes wrong, it's the president. When everything is right, it's the national team which has done well. Or the players are good. You see what I mean? So for that side of football, I'm not sure if I'm ready. And I mentioned to you off camera that I have some projects which I feel I want to focus on the next 10 years, which will require a lot of my time. And to be first president, you have to be very dedicated in terms of time.
So no big politician can walk up to you the way they did in 2016 and talk you out of your pre-current statement?
No.
Kawani.
I'm not ready.
See you when you're ready.
All right, Zita. Thanks.